Welcome to the first episode of The Healing Space with MannMukti. We're so glad we have you listening today. This is a space to just slow down, sip your tea, and talk honestly about our minds, our cultures, and everything in between. My name is Shruti, and we're here with
Ishani.
And every episode, we will be unpacking the stories, emotions, and healing journeys that make us who we are, from mental health and identity to community and self-compassion. So let's jump right into this week's discussion.
First, we would like to briefly introduce our club, MannMukti, here on campus. MannMukti is a South Asian mental health organization and it is intended to help people of our community find a safe space where we can destigmatize mental health and improve awareness. We hold many fun, informative, and self-care events on campus, so make sure to join us as we break down walls on misconceptions of mental health. And for our first episode, we are going to explore how our board members navigate their mental health throughout college and what advice they would give us. And more specifically, I'm a freshman and Shruti is a senior, so we're kind of also going to incorporate that on the differences and similarities on how we manage our mental health here.
All right. So mental health is such a hot topic, but as a freshman with having everything new in college, are you often aware of your mental health, and how often do you prioritize it?
Okay, I think definitely being a freshman, first semester especially, I was not very aware of my mental health because I think freshman year is just a complicated time because you're kind of grieving your old life and then you're kind of stepping into your new life. So it's definitely hard to be aware of how you're feeling. So I think you're just so caught up trying to do a bunch of things. But I think slowing down into second semester, I've really kind of gotten to know myself better and be okay, this is what stresses me out. Or I'm not gonna drink coffee at 5 p.m. because I know it's gonna stress me out later. And just doing stuff like that where it's okay, I'm gonna take a moment for myself. One thing I've personally been doing is attending yoga classes on campus that are free. So I think another part is just utilizing the stuff that you do have around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just things like that just helps me prioritize my mental health and just kind of doing one thing for myself every day. Maybe I'll go on a 15-minute walk or I'll do Just Dance for 30 minutes. So just something that I love doing and I can also do it incorporated daily because I think consistency is also very important with taking care of your mental health.
Oh, yeah, of course. I think freshman year is one of the first times you're really by yourself in the world after high school and just living at home and everything. Yeah, definitely. I think from the beginning of freshman year to now, there's been so much change in who I am, also in how I think about mental health, because I think the concept of being alone really changed for me because when you go through college, there's going to be so many times that you will have to eat alone, you will have to do your schoolwork alone because your friends really just cannot be there the whole time with you.
Yeah.
So, as you said, I think it's so important that you have certain things that you do for yourself, like the yoga, um, and just other ways to decompress and take your mind off of the pressures and everything, especially if you're in a very competitive field or expecting to go into a very competitive field. It is really important to have time to decompress because if you don't, that leads to burnout so fast. And that's when the loneliness hits a lot more differently because you have to be able to be your own support sometimes as well as also relying on other people for social support. But it's important to have that foundation for yourself.
I think adding that in, the being alone, is a really, really great point because when I came into college, I felt my expectation was to have magically have a big group of friends that we all do everything together. But I didn't really realize that how much alone time college really is. So I think that's great that you also brought that point up and just not letting get it to you. Because I remember I saw something where it was loneliness is a feeling, but being alone is just a situation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I think when I was a freshman, I used to be so embarrassed to eat alone because, especially in high school, there's weird social dynamics.
No, I agree.
Yes, but it's really not like that once you step out into the real world. Everyone's just minding their own business, and if they're not, I'm sorry, but they're just weird. But
for sure.
yeah, I think what you said, being alone is really different from being lonely, is such an important thing because I'm someone who also really values my solitude and I need to be alone many times to decompress. But yeah.
And then we're going to move on to our next question because I think we did a great job of talking about that. So in college, like there's obviously like a lot going on. You know, you have like your clubs, classes, extracurriculars. So like, how do you like? What's your best way to like also incorporate your mental health into that and like balance everything that's already on your calendar?
I think the best way to go about this is really understanding what organization looks like for you. And this is something that I really didn't even grasp until my senior year of college, which I really wish I paid more attention and gave more time to develop organizational skills earlier on in college. Because when you allocate time for schoolwork, for friends, for everything that you deem important into your life, and you time block everything, it sounds really mechanical, it sounds robotic, but it really saves you so much brain power and so much decision fatigue that people say. You don't have to constantly be thinking, oh, I should be doing something else right now. I should be spending time with my friends right now. It really gives you time to chunk everything out. And when you do that, there's less chaos in your life. So when you can actually pay attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and dedicate time to doing things that help your mental health. When you're constantly procrastinating, when you're just not on top of it, it makes your mental health so much worse, at least in my opinion, because now you have so much on top of you. And if you're not already feeling well, that's so much additional stress. So I think the best way to really balance your mental health and everything else is organizational skills, whether that looks like getting Notion, which is a website that I use to organize my whole life, from like personal goals to school goals to really everything. I think just finding out how you do it and what works for you, because Notion works for me, but that might not work for everyone else. And I think you need to put in a lot of research to really figure out what works for you. It goes with a lot of trial and error, but I think that is something worth putting a lot of time into and a lot of thought into as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best at like having a schedule and stuff like that. So I think what Shruti said was really helpful for me as well because yeah, it is a struggle sometimes. I will be honest because it's like there's just so much I want to do, and like
Mhm.
sometimes I just don't want to do stuff, and that's just like
Exactly. I think really it comes down to the discipline of it all. And it's such a hard thing to develop. I'm still trying to develop it better in myself and everything, but really sticking to the things that you're supposed to do that day, regardless if you feel too lazy for it. And it's
yeah,
not to say that if you're sad or something, you shouldn't take time off. But if you're just, I guess, you're just not feeling up for it, at least do a little bit of what
a
you're
little bit.
supposed to do.
I think that also helps because there's these times where like I want to go to a club meeting, but I really don't feel like it. But I'll go for like a little bit, and then I'll
Mhm.
actually end up like really enjoying it.
Exactly, yeah. Like you don't know what you're gonna enjoy or not unless you really stick to something. Again,
Yeah.
what you said earlier about consistency. Yeah. Again, so going off of that, Ishani, what do you do to strengthen your mental health sometimes? How do you help the others around you strengthen it as well?
One thing that's really been helpful for me is honestly just like working out, whether that's like
Mm.
going to the gym or just like going on like a quick run or walk.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just been like something that has been consistent with me because it's just like it's also helping you to like clear your mind, but it also helps to like work out your body. So I'm kind of getting like a 2-in-1 deal. So that's also great.
Yeah.
Um, gyms is like I mean it doesn't have to look like you do the same thing every day. Like you can do like yoga
Right.
one day, you can do like you can hit arms the next day, you can go on
Yeah.
like a walk the third day.
Hmm.
I think that's just one thing that has been like super helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I think also just like opening about my experiences to other people because I'm the type of person where it's like I kind of tend to like not tell anyone what I'm feeling
Mm.
and just like act like everything's okay. But I have been kind of like slowly, opening up to the people and like I've learned that like people are actually like willing to help you.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's just another thing. And I feel like in turn that also helps like other people strengthen their mental health because like look, I can use one of my friends for example. Like we started opening up to each other and then it got to the point where it's like she would tell me something that I would tell her something, and then like now we just like build it off of that, and like we both have like a safe space within each other that we feel
Mm,
comfortable in.
yeah.
So just like I mean, you can always test the waters for a little bit because some people will not be receptive, but I feel like when you find the people that do, it'll be so great.
Oh yeah. I think putting out that bit of vulnerability in yourself, it invites other people to also share what they're feeling vulnerable about. And that's where connection happens, I think, when two people open up to each other, because when you just don't open up at all, what are you really developing a relationship about?
Yeah, no, I like totally agree because I feel like I mean I love talking about surface level stuff. But I feel like
Mm.
sometimes it's like when you go in deeper, you'll kind of realize like other aspects about you yourself and also
Mm.
like the person you're talking to.
Oh yeah, and I completely agree with you what you said. I think it helps you learn so much about yourself, and it helps you learn like different perspectives on the same thing that you and another friend might be going through. They might have such a brilliant way of looking at things that you've never thought about
Yeah,
before. And yeah, it's just, I think it really feeds your soul to have like really strong friendships that you can share everything with. And also about what you said about exercise, I think that's so important. I always undermined exercise on how it relates to mental health, but there's so many studies and research showing that exercise helps with brain health, helps with mental health and everything. I've been trying to go to the gym more
yeah,
recently as well. And yeah, I think also finding out what you like too. It can be like any form of exercise.
yeah. No, like sometimes I will literally just like put on like random music and like dance, and I'll call that like
Yeah.
my workout
Yeah,
for the
that's so
day.
fun.
Like it doesn't have to be like you're like lifting like 200 pounds every day. Like
Exactly, exactly. It doesn't have to be strength training. It doesn't have to be building like the perfect body or anything. It can just be just any light movement, yoga, dance, whatever you want it to be. And again, with the exercise, I think getting yourself the right nutrition as well, eating right,
yeah, I agree.
and uh, sleeping right.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
when you have that schedule, as we talked about before, like the organizational skills, it becomes easier to do all those things that can help you keep on track as
Yeah,
well.
I totally agree with that because I feel like also tying into the schedule thing, I feel like if you have your schedule planned out, like it's easy for you to like go on bed on time and like eat
Mm-hmm.
stuff you're supposed to eat. Because I feel like sometimes I'll just let my work pile up. Like I will choose to have a good afternoon, so all my work will pile up during the nighttime, and then I just
Right.
won't get to bed. And then
Exactly. And then that sets you up to wake up late the next morning,
yeah,
and then now you're off schedule, and then you're gonna procrastinate again.
exactly.
Yeah, it's just an endless cycle, and I think it's so important to like nip it in the bud as soon
I
as you can.
agree.
Yeah,
I fully agree with that.
yeah, especially like early into your college career as well, because once you hit that junior year mark, it becomes the course load becomes a lot heavier. So it's hard to implement new things when you're so stuck in like a groove that you've been in since forever, and that is something I did struggle with a lot.
No, you're fine. I'm honestly still struggling with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think also getting off of your phone.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know everyone's moms tell them that, but honestly, your mom is right.
No, because like you will catch you on Instagram reels. Like it needs to stop.
Exactly. Like I it is such an addicting thing, especially for me. I feel like I get sucked into it, and when I'm trying to get off, I feel my brain like urging me to keep
Scrolling,
scrolling.
yeah.
Yeah, even when I'm not even on it, I'm like, "Oh, I should do this again. I should do this again." But I mean, it's an addiction, and all addictions basically are the same in certain ways. So it again, it takes a lot of discipline to get out of that. But
Yeah.
getting off your phone is such an important thing for mental health as well.
Yeah, I agree with that as well because it's just that like everything ties into like everything just like ties together in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think like there's also some other questions that we wanted to ask. So it's like how comfortable are you talking about your mental health? Because I was kind of talking about how like me and my friend opened up to each other, but I wasn't really the most open person.
Mm.
But also like what do you think that like being South Asian like means for like talking about mental health? Because I know it personally like the experience I've had, it doesn't really seem like people in the South Asian like community are too like keen on
Mhm.
talking about mental health and just stuff and like stuff that they've been struggling about.
Mhm. I think we often think as second generation Indian Americans that we are kind of beyond some of the cultural conditionings that our parents had and previous generations had. But I think very definitely South Asian people do have a hard time talking about mental health, even in our age group. And I think I'm someone who's pretty comfortable talking about my mental health. I, of course, it's to a certain level, more
Yeah.
intimate things I would share with closer people, but overall, I've been fine talking about it, but I do know that it's hard for a lot of people to open up about. And that's why we have MannMukti to have conversations that other people of the community can relate to and to make them see that it's not something weird and it's something that everyone goes through, something everyone has mental health struggles. And we can only get help if we do open up.
Yeah, I honestly fully agree with that. Just because, like, I feel like I've had times where I'll try to open up to someone and, I won't get the response that I wanted
Mm-hmm.
back. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that also doesn't mean that you should stop trying to open up to people.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we face rejection a little bit, we close off even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's important to not close up, but to find the right people to talk to. And that only comes with trial and error. I think there's a certain pressure in the South Asian community to project this image of perfection.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and hide things like our struggles and our academic issues, anything like that. But it's okay to not be perfect. And although it seems like people are constantly watching you like a hawks almost, it really doesn't matter because your life is yours. At the end of the day, you need to get the help that you need. And yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that. I also just feel like your pace isn't gonna be as like same as anyone else's. Like you're always gonna
mm-hmm.
be like in your own lane, so don't even like, you know,
Exactly.
don't even like try to like compare yourself to like other people because like no one's gonna experience the stuff that you're experiencing.
Exactly. And even if you fail, as long as you're learning from the lessons, as long as you're growing, you're doing okay. You're fine. And that's all you can do. Life is just a learning experience. It's not a race to be the best or anything because what even is the best really if you're not even happy at
Yeah,
the end of the day?
because like I feel like even in like South Asian families, there's a lot of like academic pressure as well, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you don't do like a certain like career, like if you don't like get like the highest job in that career, it
Mm-hmm.
just seems like you've kind of like failed. Even though I feel like now like kind of like being older, I feel like that isn't true because it's like it's just like people are just like multifaceted.
Exactly.
Like if you choose to do a career that isn't part of like academics, like that's also totally fine.
Exactly. Because, I mean, what matters other than happiness?
Yeah, no, I agree. Because if something is making you happy, like you should definitely chase after
Mm-hmm.
that. I feel.
100%. Yeah, I think the whole thing of gossip in the community and just kind of,
Yeah, gossip
mm-hmm.
as well. Because I feel like people will be talking
Oh,
behind your back.
yeah.
No one will say it to
Oh,
your
yeah.
face
I
though.
think a lot of the patterns that our parents fell into, I think our generation falls into the same patterns. Like, there's so many jokes on aunties and uncles, but I see a lot of people our age do the same
Girl,
behavior.
same. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, guys, like let's not bring that into like this
exactly.
generation.
Exactly. I think it's hypocritical to act progressive when you're really not.
Yes. Oh, we. That's actually a great point
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up because I feel like so many people want to act progressive, but they're really
Mhm.
not in reality. So it's just like,
Exactly. I think it's okay to have certain opinions and ideas that you know are not doing the best for you, but it's okay in the way that it's important to recognize them and it's important to work on them.
yeah, I agree with that as
Yeah.
well. Because I feel like a lot of us have just been conditioned to be like a certain
Mhm.
way. So I think it's kind of hard. Like if you've grown up in that environment, it's definitely hard for you to like push yourself up
Mhm.
and like fight against it.
Mhm.
But I feel like we can definitely do that here in Manmukti.
Exactly. I think that's where self-reflection and self-awareness comes into play because you can only really fix these things if you're aware of your patterns and if you're aware of your thinking patterns. And that comes from observing yourself and observing your mental health. So when you make time for this, you're also healing generational trauma.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing because we don't want these toxic patterns to go on to the generations after us. We don't want to give this to our children in the future. So, again, it is so important to take time to look at yourself. What are you doing? What thoughts are you having lately? And the people around you, surround yourself with positivity. And that sounds like such a shallow statement, but truly be around people who support you.
I think that is also very true because I definitely believe in like quality over quantity.
Yeah,
Because I feel like even having like one person who really cares for you and really sees you can really just be like really uplifting.
exactly. And I think this is something that people really see over the years of college because as a freshman, a lot of people usually have a lot of friends in the beginning of the year. But I think every year that goes by, you kind of weed people out based
Uh
on their
huh.
character and how they treat you. I think from the beginning of my college to now, I the amount of friends that I have has decreased a lot, but it's shown me like who is genuine and who is actually there for me. And it's important to I cut people out. I guess like you can say cut people out.
Well, yeah, I also don't think that's a bad thing to
Yeah,
be
I don't
honest
think it's a
because it's
bad thing
like,
either.
yeah, as long as you're like respectful
Mhm.
about it, like I don't think you're doing anything wrong.
Exactly. I think there's also a way to go about it too. You don't have to
Uh
be
huh.
disrespectful. You don't have to be mean to anyone. But if someone is harming you, and even if someone's ideas and thoughts about themselves are harming you, as in their negative thinking patterns are kind of
Yeah,
spreading onto you, I think it's also important to keep them at a distance.
I agree. I feel like definitely just like where you are as well kind of like impacts
Mm-hmm.
that. Because I feel like if like I was surrounded by like people that weren't really great for my mental health like last semester, but I feel like now that I'm kind of like gone out of that, it's been like better.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's also like a good talking point to talk about because it's like I feel like college is a time where you can like pick the people you want to hang out with.
Exactly.
Like it's not like high school where you're just stuck with the same people for like years on end.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if you get the chance to pick, which we all have the chance to pick, like pick
Exactly.
wisely. And like I feel like don't let like the feeling of like loneliness get to you.
Exactly. I think it's so important to have a support system, but you'll only have that support system when you are okay with being alone at the same time because
Yes.
then you'll actually pick the friends that are meant for you. And also, you need to have friends that support where you want to go in life, support your dreams, support your aspirations. They should be friends that if you say, "Oh, I want to be an astronaut, I want to go to space," they should be like, "Hell yeah."
Yeah, exactly.
But
Like
you shouldn't have friends that drag you back. You shouldn't have friends that make you feel like you're crazy or you're naive for having big dreams.
exactly, yeah. Because I feel like it's just like I feel like some people like everyone kind of talk about the aunties and uncles, but some people will be like so sneaky towards
Mhm.
you. It's like kind of
Yeah,
scary,
the snarky comments, the backhanded thing.
especially the backhanded
Yeah,
comments.
it is so common and it's so unnecessary too because we can all just be people that support each other, that just advocate for our own happiness and for others' happiness as well. It's just those kind of behaviors are just completely unnecessary. And yeah, I think the friends that you have in these 4 years will honestly make or break you, which is kind of scary, but it's also true. And it's okay if you have bad friends in right now or like in the past because that also helps you learn about people and about how you want to go about things in the future. I don't regret any of the friends that I've made in college, even if I've had to cut them off because that's made me learn so much about who I am. Mhm.
Yeah. I feel like once that does happen too, like I feel like we've all been in that boat where it's like we had a really bad like friendship breakup or
Yeah.
like we ended something with someone and like realized that they were a bad friend all
Mhm.
along. But I feel like that definitely does teach you about yourself and like it just proves that like you only like the more you like put yourself out there, the better like things will be.
Exactly. Exactly. I think yeah, it just helps you learn about what your boundaries are.
Yeah, boundaries is also a big
Mhm.
thing I want to add
Mhm.
in.
And you need to do what you can to help yourself. I mean, once you're out here in the real world, I mean, college is not even really the real world, but it's more
No,
real
yeah.
world than high school ever was.
I agree with that. Because I feel like stage, it feels like its own little bubble, but not as much as high school was.
Yeah, like once you're out here, then you have to be your own biggest supporter, your own biggest
Yeah.
advocate, and you need to put yourself first.
No, I do agree with that as well.
All right, so that was a great discussion, and that marks the end of our first episode. For our listeners, as a reminder, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to join the MannMukti community by following us and continuing to stay tuned to our new episodes coming out.
Yeah, and then make sure to follow us on our Instagram, and our handle is at MannMukti NCSU. And then we really hope you'll join and keep up with our contact. And some mental health resources are the Mental Health Support and Resources Center, which houses the Campus Counseling Center. And they also have free sessions there as well. And then they also have other services such as group therapy, individual therapy, and then just other intermittent sessions talking about mental health. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you soon.